Leora Vale, 34-year-old wife of Bren Vale, lay weak in a hospital recovery room after a scheduled abdominal surgery when Bren Vale, 38-year-old husband of Leora and heir to Vacati Capital Trust, walked in wearing a travel blazer and holding his passport wallet. Nurse Elka, 41-year-old recovery nurse assigned to Leora, stood near the bed. Amos Greer, 58-year-old hospital discharge coordinator handling her aftercare release plan, paused at the doorway with a tablet in his hand. Bren did not ask if the pain had eased. He did not ask what the surgeon said. He only looked at the empty visitor chair beside her bed and said, "Don't turn this into a performance. You have nurses. I have responsibilities." The words hurt because Leora had spent 6 years protecting his image, rewriting his speeches, calming his investors, and carrying his failures in silence. No one defended her. Nurse Elka lowered her eyes because she had seen too many families break in rooms like this. Amos froze because the discharge plan clearly listed Bren as Leora's responsible adult contact. The empty chair beside the bed felt louder than Bren's excuse. Leora looked pale in her hospital gown. Her wedding ring was sealed inside a plastic belongings bag beside her phone. Her fingers trembled against the blanket, but her face stayed calm. Bren thought she was too weak to question him. Then Leora looked past his shoulder and saw Sable Rennick, 32-year-old mistress of Bren and luxury image consultant for Vacati Capital Trust, standing near the nurse's station with his sunglasses in her hand. She wore a cream travel outfit. Beside her stood 2 matching suitcases and Calder Pike, 50-year-old private driver regularly hired by Vacati executives for airport transfers. But what Bren did not know was that Leora had already signed the rescue control documents through Larkmere Dominion, the private investment empire she owned in silence. The final voting control confirmation was moving through the shareholder registry that same morning. The 2B investment firm his father worshipped was no longer truly under the Vale family's control. For months, Leora had been quietly saving Vacati Capital Trust from debt pressure, hidden losses, client withdrawals, and investor panic, while Bren built his future on a company he never knew his own wife had just taken control of. Then Sable smiled from the hallway and said, "Recovery is easier when a woman accepts reality." Bren did not correct her. Instead, he walked out with his mistress and flew to a luxury resort while his wife lay alone in pain. That was the moment Leora stopped being the quiet wife everyone ignored and became the woman who would decide what happened next. This is not just a story about betrayal. It is about what happens when a man abandons the only woman holding the truth, the proof, and the power to destroy his lies. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it is like letting Leora stand alone in that hospital room again. When you subscribe, you stand with every quiet person who was betrayed, mocked, and underestimated before finally rising. Please subscribe now and comment where you're watching from. 10 minutes before Bren Vale was supposed to walk on stage, his future almost collapsed in his hands. The ballroom inside the private hospital foundation center was full of wealthy donors, nervous investors, polished board members, medical trustees, and cameras waiting for the perfect speech. Crystal lights shone over white tables. Waiters moved quietly between guests. Behind the stage, the gold logo of Vacati Capital Trust stood bright enough to make the company look stronger than it really was. Bren Vale, 38, heir to Vacati Capital Trust and husband of Leora Vale, stared at his tablet like it had betrayed him. "The file is gone," he whispered. Leora Vale, 34, Bren's wife and the quiet woman his family treated like decoration, stood beside him near the service hallway. She wore a simple black evening dress, not loud enough to compete with the room, but elegant enough to belong anywhere. "What do you mean gone?" she asked softly. "The speech file is corrupted," Bren said, breathing hard. "The printed copy is missing. Dad is watching. The board is watching. If I go up there and stumble, they'll think I'm not ready." Across the ballroom, Orson Vale, 67, Bren's father and proud founder of Vacati Capital Trust, stood with a circle of investors. He smiled like a king waiting for his son to inherit the crown. Beside him stood Vesta Vale, 63, Bren's mother and Leora's cold mother-in-law, wearing pearls and a look that always made Leora feel like she had been measured and found too plain. Bren gripped the tablet harder. "Do something," he said. "Not please, not help me, just do something." Leora looked at him for 1 second. Then she stepped away from the noise, opened the small black notebook she always carried, and began to write. She did not ask what he wanted to say. She already knew. For 6 years, she had listened to him practice in mirrors, fixed the weak parts of his arguments, softened his proud words, and added warmth where his heart sounded empty. She remembered the numbers he forgot. She remembered which donor cared about patient recovery programs. She remembered which investor was worried about Verith's shrinking liquidity. She remembered which board member had quietly asked whether Bren was mature enough to lead. Her pen moved fast. Bren paced behind her. "Hurry, Leora," she kept writing. A few feet away, Riven Holt, 45, Verith's chief financial officer and one of the few executives who still looked tired instead of powerful, watched with quiet concern. He knew the company had cash flow pressure. He knew investors were asking harder questions. He knew tonight mattered more than the guests understood. But even Riven did not know how much Leora understood. When Leora finished, she tore the pages from the notebook and handed them to Bren. He scanned the first lines. His breathing slowed. "This is good," he said, almost surprised. Leora smiled faintly. "You only need to sound honest." Bren looked at her, annoyed by the truth hidden inside the sentence. Then he walked toward the stage. The room quieted. Orson lifted his chin with pride. Vesta placed one hand over her necklace and smiled before Bren even spoke. Several Verith board members leaned toward one another, waiting to judge whether Bren was finally ready for command. Then Bren began. He spoke about responsible investment, patient dignity, hospital access, and protecting futures. He used Leora's words with a steady voice. He paused where she had marked the page. He softened his tone exactly where she had written, "Look at the hospital families, not only the investors." The applause came strong. Orson's face filled with relief. Vesta beamed as if she had raised a genius. One investor whispered, "That is the kind of man Verith needs next." No one looked at Leora. She stood near the side wall, hands folded, watching the room praise the man she had just saved. For a moment, her heart ached with an old memory. She was 19 again, standing beside a quiet hospital bed. Maribel Dane, 56, Leora's mother and the private investor who had built the Dane fortune in silence, held her daughter's hand with fading strength. "When people know what you own," Maribel had whispered, "they stop showing you who they are. Hide the money until love proves itself without it." Leora had not understood the full weight of those words then. Now, watching Bren accept praise for words he had not written, she understood too much. A soft voice broke into her thoughts. "Mrs. Vale." Leora turned. Mara Kest, 52, the hospital foundation administrator who managed donor relations for the medical center, stood beside her with grateful eyes. "I did not know you would attend tonight," Mara said quietly. "The Dane wing would not exist without—" Leora touched her arm gently, stopping her before the sentence became dangerous. "Tonight is about Verith," Leora said. Mara understood and lowered her voice. "Of course." Across the room, Callan Morrow, 48, a respected corporate attorney attending as a legal guest with another donor group, watched the exchange carefully. To everyone else, he looked like just another lawyer in a dark suit. To Leora, he was the man handling the rescue transaction Bren could not imagine. Their eyes met for only a second. Callan gave no sign of recognition. Leora gave none back. That was how secrets survived in rooms full of people who thought power always introduced itself loudly. When Bren stepped down from the stage, guests surrounded him. Orson clapped his shoulder. Vesta kissed his cheek. Board members congratulated him as if the speech had risen from his soul. Then Sable Rennick, 32, Verith's new luxury image consultant, hired to improve the company's public face, approached Bren with 2 glasses of sparkling water. "Perfectly done," Sable said, handing him the glass he preferred with lime and no ice. Leora noticed. Bren had never told most staff that small detail. Sable placed one hand on his arm just long enough to look natural to strangers and intimate to a wife. "You sounded powerful," Sable added. Bren lowered his voice when he answered her. Leora could not hear the words, but she saw his expression change. Softer, warmer, almost private. Then Vesta approached Sable and kissed both her cheeks. "My dear," Vesta said, "you made everything look beautiful tonight." Leora stood close enough to hear it. Vesta had never once greeted her that warmly. Nothing had been confessed, not yet, but something had been planted. Later, when the applause had faded and the guests began moving toward dessert, Bren finally came to Leora near the side corridor. For one foolish second, she thought he might thank her. Instead, he leaned close and said, "You were useful tonight, just don't start thinking that means you understand the room." The words landed quietly, but they cut deep. Leora looked at him. She remembered the young man who once begged for her advice because he was afraid he would never be enough for his father. She remembered loving that man. She remembered believing patience could keep him human. "I understand more than you think," she said. Bren gave a short laugh. "That's what worries me. You always think silence makes you mysterious." Before Leora could answer, Sable passed behind him. Her hand brushed his jacket. The movement was small, too small for the room to notice. But Leora saw the pale card slide into Bren's inner pocket. Bren saw Leora see it. His face hardened at once. "Don't embarrass me by imagining things," he said. Leora said nothing. A few minutes later, in the restroom, she stood alone before the mirror, breathing slowly. She told herself not to chase shadows, not yet, not without proof. Then she looked down. On the marble counter lay a small card someone had dropped. It carried the same silver crest she had seen in Sable's hand, a luxury resort crest. Leora picked it up carefully, and for the first time that night, the silence around her felt less like patience and more like warning. By morning, the small resort card from the gala was still inside Leora Vale's purse, and the name printed on it had started to feel less like a clue and more like a warning. She had not slept well. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Sable Rennick sliding that card into Bren's jacket pocket. She saw Bren's hard face when he caught her watching. She heard his words again. "Don't embarrass me by imagining things." But Leora was not imagining anything. She sat in the back of a black car the next morning, wearing dark glasses and a calm face. To Bren, she had said she was going to her final medical consultation before surgery. That was not a full lie. Her surgery was close, and her body had been warning her for months that she could not delay much longer. But the building she entered was not a clinic. It was a private legal office with tinted windows, silent elevators, and no names on the doors. Callan Morrow was waiting for her in a conference room on the 32nd floor. On the table in front of him were 3 black folders, a silver pen, and a thick document stamped with the name Larkmere Dominion. Leora removed her glasses. "Tell me," she said. Callan did not waste time. "The rescue agreement is fully executed. Escrow has confirmed funding. The transfer agent has received the voting control instructions." Leora stood still. Outside the glass wall, morning light moved across the city. Inside the room, the words hung like thunder. Verith Capital Trust, the firm Bren worshipped, the firm Orson treated like a family crown, the firm Vesta used to make Leora feel small, had just moved quietly into Leora's reach. Not publicly, not with cameras, not with her name printed across the front page, but legally the power had shifted. Callan opened the first folder. "I want one thing clear. This was not a reaction to last night. I know. It began 5 months ago when Verith's client withdrawals doubled. Then came the failed overseas investments, the risky bridge loans, the hidden liabilities, and the compliance review Orson has been trying to bury." Leora lowered herself into the chair. Callan continued. "Orson agreed to a confidential rescue buyout because the firm needed immediate capital and client confidence. He thinks Larkmere Dominion is only a private investment group acting through nominee directors. He does not know it belongs to you." Leora looked at the folders. Her name was not printed anywhere obvious. That was the point. The trusts, the holding companies, the nominee directors, the voting proxies, the private boards, the confidentiality clauses, all of it had been built years ago to keep her life separate from her fortune. Bren had never asked enough questions to find the truth. He had never wondered how she understood finance so easily. He had never asked why hospital leaders treated her with quiet respect. He had never cared why powerful people sometimes paused when she entered a room. To him, she was just his quiet wife. Useful when needed, invisible when not. Callan leaned back. "I have to ask again. After everything they have said to you, after the way they treat you, why save Verith at all?" Leora looked toward the window. For a moment, the sharp business lines on the table blurred, and she saw something softer. She remembered being 19, standing beside her mother's hospital bed. Maribel Dane had been weak then, but her voice had still carried strength. "Money can punish," her mother had told her, "but that does not mean it should. Use power to protect what cruelty would destroy." Leora blinked the memory away. "Because thousands of employees did not betray me," she said. "Clients trusted that firm with retirements, pensions, college funds, and futures. I won't punish innocent people because Orson raised a cruel son." Callan's expression softened. "That is why your mother trusted you with all of this," he said. Leora did not answer. Her throat tightened too quickly. Instead, she reached for the pen and signed where he pointed. Each signature moved quietly across the page. No cameras, no applause, no proud husband standing beside her. Just ink, silence, and control. Callan checked the final page. The registry confirmation should arrive within 48 hours. Until then, Orson will think he still has time to push Bren forward. Leora capped the pen. Let him think that. Hours later, she returned to the house Bren still thought was the center of her world. He was in the front sitting room, already dressed for lunch, looking at his watch with open irritation. Vesta stood nearby, adjusting her bracelet as if waiting for an apology she believed she deserved. You missed lunch with Mother, Bren said. Leora set her purse down. My appointment took longer than expected. Vesta gave a cold smile. Some women do enjoy making small health issues feel dramatic. Leora did not look at her. It was not small, Bren sighed. You keep disappearing like you have important things to do. Leora met his eyes. Maybe I do. For half a second the room went still. Then Bren laughed. It was not a kind laugh. Leora, he said, stepping closer, your most important job is not making my life harder. Vesta looked pleased. She always looked pleased when Bren corrected his wife. Leora felt the old ache in her chest, the one that came from remembering who Bren used to be. There had been a time when he reached for her hand under tables. A time when he asked what she thought before he made decisions. Time when he looked ashamed if his mother was rude to her. Now he only looked annoyed. My surgery is the day after tomorrow, Leora said quietly. I know. The surgical team said I cannot postpone again. Bren rubbed his forehead. I said I'll be there. You also said that the last 2 times. Because the last 2 times Verith needed me. And this time, he looked at her as if she had insulted him. This time I'll stay through discharge and bring you home, he said. I'm not a monster. The words were meant to end the conversation. Instead, they stayed in the room like a promise waiting to break. Across town, inside Verith Capital Trust, Riven Holt stood over a stack of expense approvals with a sick feeling in his stomach. Sable Rennick had just walked into his office carrying a cream folder and the confidence of someone protected by a powerful man. This needs to be processed today, she said. Riven opened the folder. The invoice was marked, Executive Optics Retreat. Private air travel, 2 oceanfront suites, luxury hospitality, premium image services, no attached agenda, no investor list, no board authorization memo. Riven looked up. Why are there 2 suites? Sable smiled slowly. Because leadership requires space. This is not a normal branding expense. Bren approved it. I still need documentation. Sable leaned closer, her perfume sharp and expensive. Ask him unless you enjoy unemployment. Then she left the folder on his desk and walked out. Riven stared at the invoice. For the first time, he wondered whether Verith was not only failing, maybe it was being used. That evening, Leora sat across the room from Bren while he smiled down at a message on his phone. The smile was private, soft, almost tender. It was the kind of smile he had not given her in months. Her own phone buzzed. Callan's name appeared. She stepped into the hallway and answered. His voice was low. Riven Holt flagged something strange in Verith's expense trail. A consultant named Sable Rennick keeps appearing where she should not. Leora looked back through the doorway. Bren was still smiling at his screen. Her fingers closed around the resort card in her purse. Preserve everything, she said, but send the full packet after my surgery. Callan paused. Leora, are you sure you want to wait? Her eyes moved to Bren again, then to the empty space beside him where she used to belong. Yes, she said. Let him believe nothing has changed. But the card in her purse felt heavier now, as if it already knew where Bren planned to go next. The first thing Leora Vale saw when she opened her eyes was the empty chair beside her bed. For a few seconds, she did not understand where she was. The room was white and quiet. Rain tapped softly against the window. A machine beside her made a steady sound. Her throat felt dry. Her body felt heavy like it belonged to someone else. Then she remembered the surgery, Bren's promise. I'll stay through discharge and bring you home. I'm not a monster. Her wedding ring sat inside a small plastic belongings bag on the table beside her. It looked strange there, sealed away like evidence from another life. Leora turned her head toward the door. No Bren, only the empty chair. A woman in blue scrubs stepped into the room with a gentle smile. Nurse Elka, 41, was the recovery nurse assigned to Leora after surgery and the first person to speak kindly to her when she woke. You're awake, Nurse Elka said softly. The procedure went well. Try not to move too quickly. Leora swallowed. My husband, Nurse Elka glanced at the chair before answering. He was here for a short time. He stepped out after the surgeon's update. Leora let out a weak breath. For one small, foolish moment, hope warmed her chest. Maybe Bren had gone to speak with the doctor. Maybe he was getting coffee. Maybe he had finally remembered that being present mattered more than being admired. The door opened. Bren walked in. But he was not wearing the soft grey sweater he had promised to wear when he brought her home. He was dressed in a clean travel blazer, dark trousers, polished shoes, and the watch he only wore when he wanted people to notice him. In one hand he held his phone. In the other he held his passport wallet. Leora noticed it at once. Her heart slowed before her mind caught up. "Are we leaving?" she asked. Bren did not come to the side of the bed. Stayed near the foot of it like the room itself made him uncomfortable. "You are leaving tomorrow if they clear you," he said. "I have to go now." The words were simple, that made them worse. Leora blinked. "Go where?" Dad called. "There's an emergency executive retreat. Investors are nervous after the gala. I need to be there." "Today?" Her voice broke on the word. Bren sighed as if her pain had bad timing. "Don't turn this into a performance. You have nurses. I have responsibilities." Nurse Elka looked down at the chart in her hands. Her face stayed professional, but Leora saw the small tightening around her mouth. Leora tried to sit higher, but pain pulled her back. She closed her eyes for 1 second, breathing through it. When she opened them, Bren was checking his phone, not her face, his phone. "Bren," she whispered, "you promised." "I stayed until they said you were stable." "That is not the same as staying with me." He looked annoyed then, not guilty, annoyed. "You always do this," he said. "You make everything emotional." Leora stared at him. Rain slid down the window behind him like thin cracks in glass. "Who is going with you?" she asked. Bren's jaw tightened. He did not answer. That silence told her to look past him. Through the open door, near the nurse's station, Sable Rennick stood in a cream-colored travel outfit. She held Bren's sunglasses in one hand and a luxury carry-on in the other. Behind her waited Calder Pike, 50, a private driver regularly hired by Varith executives for airport transfers. He stood beside 2 matching suitcases with gold luggage tags. Sable looked straight into Leora's room. Then she smiled, not kindly, not by accident. She smiled like a woman who wanted the wife to understand exactly who was leaving and who was being left. Leora's fingers curled around the hospital blanket. "You brought her here?" she asked. Bren stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sable is part of the retreat team. Don't humiliate yourself while you're medicated." Sable moved 1 step into the doorway. She did not cross fully into the room, but she was close enough for Leora to see the shine on her lips and the confidence in her eyes. "Recovery is easier," Sable said, "when a woman accepts reality." For a moment, no one moved. Leora's body was weak. Her voice was not. "Reality has paperwork, Sable," she said. "Be careful what yours says." Sable laughed softly because she had no idea what the warning meant. Bren looked at Leora as if she had embarrassed him in front of a guest instead of catching him walking out on his wife. "Enough," he snapped. "I don't have time for this." The words pulled a memory from Leora so sharply that her chest hurt. In the 2nd year of their marriage, Bren had been sick with a fever before a major investor call. He had been frightened then, though he tried to hide it. Leora had sat beside him for 2 nights, cooling his forehead, changing his sheets, cancelling her own meetings, and answering Orson's calls so Bren would not look weak. When Orson asked whether his son was falling apart, Leora had said, "Bren is stronger than he looks." She had protected his image even when he could not stand. Now she could barely sit up, and Bren was leaving with another woman. Another person entered the room. Vesta walked in carrying a small designer purse and no flowers. Her face held a smile so smooth it looked practiced. "Good you're awake," Vesta said. "Bren has a future to protect. You should be proud he has someone like Sable helping him." Leora looked at her mother-in-law. There it was, not surprise, not shame, permission. Vesta had known. Leora's eyes moved from Vesta to Bren, then to Sable waiting outside the door with his sunglasses in her hand. This betrayal was not hidden from the family. It was arranged around her. Bren tucked his passport wallet into his jacket. "The discharge coordinator will handle the aftercare paperwork." As if called by those words, Amos Greer, 58, the hospital discharge coordinator assigned to organize Leora's release and aftercare, appeared at the doorway with a tablet in his hand. His polite smile faded when he sensed the tension in the room. "I can come back," he said. "No need," Bren replied. "My wife is staying until transport is medically cleared. Bill whatever needs billing." Leora almost laughed. Even now he thought payment was presence. Amos looked from Bren to Leora. "Mrs. Vale still needs an approved support contact for the first 24 hours after discharge." Bren gave an impatient glance toward the hallway. "My assistant can arrange a nurse." Leora's heart sank lower, not because he could not arrange care, because he thought outsourcing care made abandonment decent. Bren turned to leave. "Bren," she said. He stopped, but did not turn fully. "If you walk out with her today," Leora said, "do not tell yourself I misunderstood." He looked back at her then. For a second, something like discomfort moved across his face. Then Sable shifted in the hallway and it vanished. "You need rest," he said. Then he walked out. Sable waited until Bren reached her. She handed him his sunglasses, brushed invisible lint from his sleeve, and let her fingers stay there too long. Vesta watched it happen without blinking. A few minutes later, the room was quiet again. Too quiet. Nurse Elka adjusted Leora's blanket with gentle hands. "Do you need anything?" Leora looked at the empty chair. "No," she said, "not yet." But her voice sounded far away. After Nurse Elka left, Callan Morrow entered carrying white flowers and a sealed folder. He stopped when he saw the empty chair beside the bed. Then his gaze moved to the window. Outside, below the hospital entrance, Bren and Sable were approaching the waiting car. Callan saw enough. His face hardened. "The registry confirmation is expected today," he said quietly. "Do you want me to delay public notice because of your recovery?" Leora watched Bren open the car door for Sable. A deep pain moved through her, but beneath it, something colder had begun to wake. "No," she said. "Finish it." Callan gave one slow nod. From the window, Leora watched Sable settle into the back seat. Before the door closed, Sable leaned across Bren and waved up toward the hospital room. Leora did not wave back. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her wedding ring. An unknown number had sent a photo. 2 champagne glasses sat beside a private aircraft window. Under the image were 3 words. "He chose peace." Leora stared at the message until the screen dimmed, and somewhere deep inside the silence, the first piece of evidence had already begun to breathe. The second photo arrived before breakfast, and this one did not leave room for hope. Leora Vale was sitting upright in her hospital bed, one hand pressed lightly against her side, when her phone buzzed on the tray beside her untouched water. For one breath, she thought it might be Bren. Some small, wounded part of her still wanted to believe he would remember her before the day fully began. But the number was unknown. The image opened before she was ready. Bren stood on an oceanfront balcony with sunlight behind him and the sea spread out below like something expensive and endless. Sable Rennick stood beside him in a white resort dress, her body turned toward him as if she belonged there. Bren's hand rested on Sable's waist. His wedding ring was gone. Below the photo, the caption read, "A man stands taller beside the woman he actually wants." Leora did not scream. She did not throw the phone. She did not call Bren and beg him to deny what her eyes had already accepted. She simply turned the phone face down. The quiet hurt more than noise would have. Nurse Elka entered with a cup of water and a small tray of medicine. She paused when she saw Leora's face. "Mrs. Vale," she asked gently. Leora swallowed. "Could I have a few minutes alone?" Nurse Elka looked at the phone, then at Leora's trembling fingers. She understood enough not to ask. "Of course," she said. "I'll be right outside." When the door closed, Leora finally broke. The tears came without sound at first. Then her shoulders shook, and she covered her mouth because even in pain, some part of her still did not want strangers to hear her fall apart. She cried for the empty chair. She cried for the promise Bren had made and broken. She cried for the woman she had been, the woman who kept forgiving coldness because she remembered warmth. She had saved Bren's speeches, protected his pride, carried his fears. She had hidden her own name so love could stand without money under it, and he had left her in a hospital bed to stand on a balcony with another woman. A few minutes later, the door opened softly. Callan Morrow stepped inside with no flowers this time, only a leather folder and a face that already knew the night had not been kind. Leora wiped her cheeks before he could speak. He looked at the phone. She turned it over and showed him the image. For once, Callan did not answer like an attorney. He answered like someone who had known her long enough to see the wound beneath her control. "I'm sorry," he said. Leora stared at the photo again. Bren's hand, Sable's smile, the missing ring. Then her eyes moved to the corner of the image where a silver room key sleeve sat on the balcony table. "Find out who paid for the room," she said. Callan paused. Leora looked up at him. Her face was pale, but her voice had steadied. "Not who slept there," she said. "Who paid?" That was the moment the story changed. Callan took the phone carefully, enlarged the image, and began looking for details. The room key sleeve, the resort logo, the reflection in the balcony glass, the champagne label. Every beautiful thing in the picture became a possible record, and every record could become proof. He made one call from the corner of the room, then another. While he worked, Leora closed her eyes and drifted into a memory she had tried not to visit for years. She was 23, sitting inside a quiet law office after inheriting the last protected pieces of her mother's fortune. Back then, a man she had dated for 6 months had suddenly proposed, after discovering that the Dane name was tied to private medical buildings and old investment trusts. He had not proposed before he knew, only after. Across the desk sat Dorian Hale, 61, Marable Dane's longtime estate attorney and the first lawyer who taught Leora how to protect herself with legal structures. Dorian had slid a folder toward her and said, "Now you understand why your mother used layers. That was the year Leora created Larkmere Dominion, trusts above companies, companies above assets, directors between her name and public records, not to lie to the world but to survive it." She opened her eyes again. Now those same layers had allowed her to rescue Varith without Bren, Orson or Vesta knowing. Callan returned to the bedside. The resort booking was not paid from Bren's personal account. Leora's fingers tightened around the blanket. He continued, "It was routed through Varith as part of an executive optics retreat." The words were polished. The meaning was filthy. Before Leora could answer, Callan's phone rang. He looked at the screen and answered. Riven Holt's voice came through low and tense. He was speaking from a locked archive room at Varith, where old files were stored away from the executive floor. "I found more," Riven said. "Sable's company has been billing us for months." Callan put the call on speaker only after Leora nodded. Riven continued, "Renicatelli Advisory billed Varith for luxury stakeholder alignment, brand intimacy strategy, private image restoration, oceanfront hospitality, and premium travel coordination. It sounds like corporate language, but it is hiding lifestyle spending." Leora stared at the rain on the window. Riven's voice shook. "If Bren becomes CEO, he will bury this by Monday." "Send everything to Callan," Leora said. There was a silence on the line. Riven sounded startled. "Mrs. Vale?" "Yes." He lowered his voice. "Then you should know one more thing. Orson approved part of the retreat budget after Bren pushed it through. He said it was necessary to keep investors calm." Callan enlarged the balcony photo again. In the glass behind Bren and Sable, a blurred figure sat at a resort restaurant table. White hair, dark suit, familiar posture. Orson. Leora felt the room tilt, but she did not move. Bren had not only lied, his father had helped protect the lie. The door opened before she could speak. Vesta stepped in, wearing pearl earrings and carrying a small designer bag instead of concern. "I hope you are not upsetting yourself," Vesta said. "Bren has important work. Some wives understand sacrifice." Leora looked at her for a long moment. "Did you know Orson was there?" she asked. Vesta's mouth tightened. That small silence answered everything. Callan stepped forward. "Mrs. Vale needs rest." Vesta looked between them, irritated by the boundary, then left without another word. When the door closed, Callan placed the leather folder on Leora's hospital tray. Inside was the final ownership confirmation. Larkmere Dominion now holds controlling voting interest in Varith Capital Trust. The timing was clean. The rescue agreement had been signed before surgery. The funding had cleared before Bren boarded the plane. The registry had confirmed voting control while Bren was still pretending the retreat belonged to him. Leora picked up the pen for the final acknowledgement. Her hospital bracelet brushed the page as she signed. Her hand trembled, but not from fear. Her body was weak. Her will was not. Callan watched the ink dry. "What do you want done first?" he asked. Leora looked once more at the balcony photo. "Let Bren enjoy the view," she said. "When he returns, I want him standing in a room he thinks he owns." Outside, the rain slowed against the glass, but inside Leora's folder, the storm had already been signed into motion. Bren Vale returned from the luxury vacation looking like a man who had not lost a single hour of sleep. His skin was lightly tanned. His shirt was open at the collar. His expensive watch caught the afternoon light as he stepped into Leora's private rehabilitation suite without knocking, without flowers, without shame. Leora was sitting near the wide window with a blanket over her knees. The suite was quiet, soft, and private, arranged through one of the medical networks funded by Larkmere Dominion. Bren did not know that. He assumed insurance, his last name, or his father's influence had made the room comfortable. He looked around once and gave a short nod, as if the world had done what it owed him. "You look better." He said, "Good, we need to talk about appearances." Leora looked at him slowly, not his face first. His left hand, the wedding ring was back. That almost made her laugh. "Appearances?" she asked. Bren closed the door behind him. "The board is preparing to name me interim CEO. Dad wants the announcement handled carefully. Investors are nervous and I need the family image clean." Family image, not marriage, not apology, not the wife he had left in a hospital bed. Leora folded her hands in her lap so he would not see them tighten. "And what do you need from me?" she asked. Bren relaxed, as if she had finally remembered her place. "You will attend," You will look supportive, quiet and grateful, no hospital face, no wounded wife act. Smile like you understand what my family is giving you." The words moved through the room like cold air. He thought his family was giving her value. He had no idea that on paper, her company now controlled the firm his family was fighting to keep. Leora lowered her eyes for a moment, not in weakness, but to hide the look that might have warned him. "When is the meeting?" she asked. "In a few days," Bren said. "Emergency shareholder session first, then the announcement." He moved closer, studying her like she was part of the stage design. "And Sable will be there." Leora lifted her gaze. Bren continued before she could speak. "She has been essential to stabilizing my image." "Your image," Leora said quietly, "or your lies?" His face hardened. "Careful." The word was soft, but the threat inside it was not. Before Leora answered, the door opened. Vesta entered with Sable beside her, both dressed as if they had arrived for a fitting instead of a recovery visit. Sable carried a garment bag over one arm. Vesta held a small box of accessories and wore the proud smile of a woman who believed cruelty was taste. Sable walked straight to the bed and placed the garment bag across it. "I brought options for the shareholder announcement," she said. "Something soft. Men forgive fragile women faster when they look harmless." Leora looked at the pale dress inside the bag. It was delicate, almost bridal, chosen to make her look weak beside Bren. "Is that why you dress expensive?" Leora asked. For the first time, Sable's smile slipped. Vesta's eyes narrowed. "There's no need to be rude to someone helping this family." "This family?" Leora asked. Bren cut in. "Do not start." Sable moved around the room like she owned the air in it. Her eyes landed on the hospital bracelet resting on Leora's bedside table. Leora had kept it there since the day Bren left, not because she wanted pain near her, but because she refused to pretend it had not happened. Sable picked it up between two fingers. "Keeping souvenirs from your little crisis?" she asked. Leora reached out calmly and took the bracelet from her hand. Then she placed it inside the drawer beside her chair. "Not hidden, saved." Bren watched the movement and misread it completely. He thought she was embarrassed. "Good," he said. "No one needs to see that." Leora looked at him, and for a moment her mind went back to the day after their wedding. Bren had held her hand in a small hotel lobby and told her, "One day, I'll build something big enough for us both." Back then she had almost told him the truth, that she already had more than enough, that she did not need his name, his future, or his father's money. But he had looked so sincere then, so hungry to become worthy, that she decided to let love grow without the shadow of her wealth. Now he stood before her, proud of a throne he did not know had already been sold. Bren stepped closer. "You have no idea what I can take away from you." The room became very still. Vesta smiled faintly. Sable watched with pleasure. Leora let the silence stretch long enough for all three of them to believe she was afraid. "You're right, Bren," she said. "I don't know what you can take." But she already knew what she could remove. While Bren kept talking, Leora's phone rested screen down on the side table. It was recording the conversation, not as the heart of any legal case. Callan had warned her not to depend on private words when documents were stronger. The recording was only to help her legal team understand the threats, the timing, and who was present. The real evidence was cleaner. Invoices, approval chains, corporate expense codes, vendor contracts, travel records, board emails, Riven's testimony. Sable's luxury trip had left a trail, and Bren's arrogance had signed beside too much of it. After Vesta and Sable left, Bren lingered at the door. "When I become CEO," he said, "everything changes." Leora watched him leave. Only when the door clicked shut did she whisper, "Yes, it does." Within minutes, Callan arrived with a flat leather case. He placed 3 prepared folders on the table beside her. "Emergency shareholder meeting request," he said, touching the first folder. "Forensic audit presentation," he continued, touching the second. Then he rested his hand on the third. "Divorce filing, asset separation is clean, your trusts are protected. He cannot touch what he never knew existed." Leora looked at the third folder longer than the others. Her chest tightened. For 6 years, divorce had felt like a word that belonged to other people. Angry people, failed people, people who stopped trying. Now it looked like a door. "Not yet," she said. Callan watched her carefully. "Because you are unsure?" Leora shook her head. "Because he still believes I'm attending as his wife," she said. "Let him." Callan gave one slow nod. Then his phone chimed. He checked it, and his expression changed. "The meeting notice is out," he said. He handed Leora the printed agenda. Agenda Item 3 read, "Appointment of Bren Vale as Interim Chief Executive Officer." Leora's eyes moved lower. Agenda Item 4, added by controlling shareholder, read, "Executive Misconduct Review." Bren had not seen Item 4 yet. Leora opened the drawer and placed her fingers over the hospital bracelet. The next time Bren saw it, it would not be beside a hospital bed. The invoice that could destroy Bren Vale was hidden under name, so boring most people would have skipped it. Premium Relationship Alignment Services. That was the line printed near the bottom of the file. Maylee's Win slid across Leora's recovery table 2 weeks after Bren returned from his luxury vacation. Maylee's Win, 54, was an independent forensic auditor hired by Callan Morrow to examine Varith Capital Trust's executive spending. She had sharp grey eyes, silver hair pulled into a low knot, and the calm voice of a woman who had spent years finding lies inside polished financial records. She tapped one red-marked page with her pen. This was not branding, Maylee said. This was lifestyle spending dressed up as business. Leora sat wrapped in a soft robe near the window of her rehabilitation suite. She looked stronger than she had in the hospital, but not fully well. Some mornings, pain still pulled at her body before she could stand straight. Some afternoons, walking across the room left her tired enough to sit in silence for several minutes. But every day she opened the folders. Every day she read. Every day the woman Bren thought was weak became harder to fool. Callan stood beside the table with a legal pad in his hand. Riven Holt sat across from them, nervous and pale, with a stack of copied records in front of him. Had taken a risk preserving those files. If Orson or Bren discovered it too soon, they could ruin his career before the truth reached the board. Maylee's turned another page. Renicatelli Advisory was created shortly before Sable began appearing on Bren's calendar, she said. Before that, the company had almost no serious corporate clients. Then Varith suddenly became its biggest source of income. Callan looked at Riven. Who approved the first contract? Riven swallowed. Bren pushed it. Orson allowed it. Vesta made it clear staff should treat Sable like family. Leora's eyes stayed on the page. Family, that word still had teeth. Maylee's continued. The invoices are vague. Luxury stakeholder alignment, executive optics retreat, private image restoration, brand intimacy strategy. None of it explains measurable work, deliverables, meeting notes, investor lists, or approved campaign results. Because the work was not for Varith, Leora said quietly. No one corrected her. The room fell silent for a moment. Outside, afternoon light moved softly over the curtains. Inside, everything felt sharp. The papers did not shout. They did not cry, but they told the truth better than people did. Bren had approved multiple expenses himself. Orson had ignored warnings. Sable had used her title as a door into company money. Vesta had helped make her untouchable by treating her like Bren's future partner before Leora had even healed from surgery. And the private vacation had been hidden as a business retreat. The proof was no longer emotional. It was legal. That was what made it dangerous. Leora leaned back and closed her eyes for a second. Callan noticed. You should rest, he said. I will, she replied, after I understand everything. But understanding had a cost. Later that evening, when the others stepped out to take calls, Leora opened the small drawer beside her bed. Inside lay her wedding ring and the hospital bracelet. She picked up the ring first. It looked smaller than she remembered. A flash of memory came with it. Years earlier, Bren had proposed in a quiet botanical conservatory after closing hours. Back then, he did not wear tailored suits every day. He was nervous, almost boyish, with shaking hands and honest eyes. He had chosen a simple ring because he said he wanted the promise to matter more than the price. I don't care what family you come from, he had told her. I just want you. That sentence was the reason she had kept her secret. She had not married him to test him like a cruel game. She had married him because she believed him. She had believed that if he loved her before knowing about Larkmere Dominion, then maybe the love was real. Now the same ring felt like a question she could no longer answer. She could not put it back on, but she could not throw it away. Not yet. Her phone buzzed. A message from Bren appeared, where the pale-dressed Sable chose. Don't speak at the meeting unless spoken to. Leora stared at the words. They were not a request. They were instructions. She typed back only 2 words. Of course, when Callan returned, he saw the message on her screen. Why answer like that? He asked. Leora placed the ring back in the drawer beside the bracelet. Because arrogant people walk deeper into traps they think are carpets, she said. Across town, Sable was doing exactly that. Inside Bren's office at Varith, she moved a vase of white flowers from one table to another and told an assistant the room needed to look less tired. She had already begun changing small things that did not belong to her. The flowers, the guest list, the tone of Bren's calendar, even the way staff announced visitors. When a staff member asked whether Mrs. Vale would attend the shareholder meeting, Sable smiled. She is recovering slowly, she said. Emotionally, too. Bren needs calm people around him now. The lie was smooth, almost caring, that made it uglier. Then Sable handed over a design request for a new office nameplate. Bren Vale, interim chief executive officer. The assistant hesitated. The appointment has not been voted on yet. Sable's voice cooled. Have it ready. In another office, Riven saw the request pass through the internal system. His stomach tightened. If Bren became CEO, everything they had found could vanish under executive pressure, staff fear, deleted access trails, or rushed privilege claims. He copied the request and sent it to Callan. Back in the rehabilitation suite, Maylis returned to the table with a new folder. Her expression had changed. Callan noticed first. What is it? Maylis did not sit down. I found one invoice that does not match the others, she said. Leora looked up. Maylis placed the page on the table and turned it toward her. This payment to Renicatelli Advisory was not pulled from the general marketing budget, Maylis said. It was routed through a restricted investor protection account before being moved through another cost center. Riven went still. Callan's face darkened. Leora read the number twice. For a few seconds, the room made no sound. She understood enough to know this was different. Luxury travel was bad. False invoices were serious. But touching protected money meant Bren had crossed a line that could not be cleaned with apologies, family influence, or a public relations statement. Callan's voice was low. This is no longer just removal. This may become criminal exposure if outside counsel confirms intent. Leora looked at the hospital bracelet in the open drawer, then at the invoice on the table. Her pain wanted speed. Her discipline chose law. Then we keep it clean, she said. No shouting. No revenge that weakens the case. Maylis nodded once, almost with respect. Riven released a breath he had been holding. Callan closed the folder carefully, as if even the paper had become dangerous. Outside the suite, evening settled quietly against the windows, but inside the room, every name on that invoice had just moved one step closer to the boardroom. The dinner table was set like a celebration, but Leora Vale could feel the execution hidden under the silverware. The executive dining room at Varith Capital Trust sat above the main board floor, with tall glass windows, dark wood walls, and a long table polished so brightly it reflected every face around it. Orson Vale had ordered the private dinner for the night before the emergency shareholder meeting. To him, it was not really dinner. It was a coronation rehearsal. Bren sat near the head of the table, relaxed and proud, one arm resting close to Sable Rennick's chair. Sable sat beside him like she had been placed there by right. Vesta sat across from them, smiling at the arrangement as if Leora had already been removed from the family picture. Leora was placed at the far end of the table, not beside her husband, not near Orson, not even near the conversation. She sat where a guest would sit when no one wanted to offend her openly, but everyone wanted her to understand she did not matter. Her body was still recovering. She had chosen a simple dark dress because it gave her room to breathe. Under the table, one hand rested near her side when the pain pulled, but her face stayed calm. That calmness irritated Bren more than tears would have. Orson lifted his glass. Tomorrow will settle things. The shareholders need confidence, and this family will give it to them. Bren smiled. They already know I'm ready. Sable touched his wrist. They will after tomorrow. Leora watched the touch. It was small but open. No one corrected it. No one looked ashamed. That was the final cruelty. They were no longer hiding the disrespect from her. They were testing how much of it she would swallow. Vesta turned her cold smile toward Leora. Tomorrow will be a new chapter for this family, she said. Some people will need to learn their place. The room became quiet enough for the ice in Orson's glass to shift. Leora looked at Vesta. And where is my place? Bren answered with a bored sigh. Not tonight, Leora. But Vesta was not finished. A wise woman knows when the world is moving beyond her. Sable leaned back slightly, enjoying it. Bren added, after tomorrow, I won't have time for emotional distractions. Leora's eyes moved to him. Is that what I am? Before Bren could answer, Sable smiled and said, a distraction that stayed too long. No one laughed loudly. That would have been less cruel. Instead, they let the words sit there, clean and sharp, while the servers cleared plates and pretended not to hear. Leora felt something inside her bend, but not break. For years, she had told herself that silence was patience. Then she had told herself patience was love. Now she understood that some people did not see patience as love at all. They saw it as permission. Orson set his glass down. You should be grateful Bren has kept this marriage respectable. Most men in his position would have left already. Leora turned toward him slowly. The old Leora might have lowered her eyes. The woman who loved Bren might have tried to keep peace, but the woman sitting there now had seen his invices, his lies, and his mistress's smile from a hospital doorway. Some men in your position, she said, should have read their rescue documents more carefully. The table went still. For the first time that night, Orson's face changed. His eyes narrowed. What did you say? Bren laughed before Leora could answer. This is what I mean. She hears one finance word and thinks she's dangerous. Sable smiled again, but this time it was thinner. Vesta shook her head. You see, drama, always drama. Leora picked up her water glass and took a slow sip. She did not explain. She did not defend herself. The point of a locked door was not to warn the person walking toward it. It was to wait until they tried the handle. Dinner ended with Bren speaking about tomorrow like it was already done. He talked about his first move as interim CEO, the office he would redesign, the people he would replace, and the kind of public statement Sable would help him release. He never once mentioned Leora, except to remind her what to wear. The pale dress, he said near the elevator, and don't look tired. Leora looked at him quietly. I will look exactly how I need to. He frowned, but Sable slipped her hand through his arm and pulled him away before he could respond. A few minutes later, Leora walked alone down the executive corridor. The lights were dim now. Most employees had gone home. The building felt like it was holding its breath. Near the archive hallway, Riven Holt stepped out from behind a half-open door. His face was tense. Mrs. Vale, he whispered. Leora stopped. Riven, he held a thin folder against his chest like it might burn him. I should not be here. Then why are you? He looked over his shoulder. Because if I wait until tomorrow, they may lock me out of the system. He handed her the folder. Inside were printed internal emails. Bren had ordered staff to classify Sable's vacation expenses as investor stabilization. One message showed him writing that the charges should be kept away from general review until leadership transition is complete. Leora read it twice. Her pain became very quiet. Riven's voice shook. If they know I gave this to you, I'm finished. Leora closed the folder carefully. No, if this is true, you're finally free. His eyes filled with something like relief, but fear stayed with it. I tried to warn Orson, he said. He told me not to damage family momentum. Family momentum, Leora repeated softly. That was what they called it when truth stood in their way. Riven left through the side corridor. Leora stayed there a moment longer, holding the final piece. Then memory came again, her mother's hospital room, the low light. Marable Dane's thin hand wrapped around hers. When the time comes, Marable had said, do not destroy people because they hurt you. Reveal what they built in the dark and let the light do the rest. Leora had not known then how hard mercy could be. Now she did. She placed the folder inside her bag and walked toward the elevator. Before she reached it, Sable stepped from the corner near the glass wall. She must have been waiting. Leaving already? Sable asked. Leora stopped. Sable walked closer, her heels soft against the floor. After tomorrow, Bren won't need to pretend anymore. Leora looked at the woman who had waved from the car, sent the photos, and smiled while Bren erased his wife in public. You're right, Leora said. Sable's smile widened. Then Leora added, neither will I. For the first time, Sable's smile faded. The elevator doors opened behind Leora. She stepped inside without another word, and as the doors closed, the folder in her bag felt less like paper and more like a match waiting for morning. Bren Vale walked into the glass boardroom like the company already belonged to him. Every chair was filled. Every face was watching. Shareholders sat along both sides of the long table. Legal observers stood quietly near the back wall. 2 security officers waited near the double doors, still and silent, as if the room expected trouble before anyone said a word. Bren smiled anyway. He wore the dark suit Leora had once helped him choose for important meetings. She remembered telling him the color made him look steady. At the time, he had kissed her forehead and said she always knew how to make him feel stronger. Now he wore that same suit to replace her with power. Sable Rennick sat behind him, close enough to look important, but not close enough to have an official seat. Her cream jacket matched the pale dress she had chosen for Leora, the dress Leora had not worn. Vesta sat near Orson with a proud smile that looked almost hungry. Orson kept his chin high, but his eyes moved too often toward the folders in front of the board members. At the head of the table sat Edris Vane, 62, the board chair of Varith Capital Trust, and the man responsible for keeping the emergency shareholder meeting formal, legal, and controlled. His face was calm, but his fingers rested tightly on the agenda. Bren leaned towards Sable and whispered, "Watch this." Sable smiled like she already knew how the story ended. Edris lifted the meeting gavel once. This emergency shareholder session of Varith Capital Trust is now called to order, he said. All attendees have received the revised agenda. Bren's smile flickered for half a second. Revised, he whispered. Before Sable could answer, the boardroom doors opened. Leora entered. The room changed. She was not wearing the pale dress. She was not dressed to look soft, weak, grateful, or harmless. She wore a tailored dark suit that made her look calm and untouchable. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her face was pale from recovery, but her eyes were clear. Callan Morrow walked beside her carrying a black legal case. Maylis Wynne followed with a stack of audit folders. Riven Holt entered last, tense but upright, like a man who had spent too long afraid and was finally choosing a side. Bren frowned. What is she doing here? He said, loud enough for several people to hear. No one answered him at first. Leora walked to the empty seat near the head of the table, not beside Bren. Not behind him, near the chair reserved for controlling shareholder representation. Orson stood suddenly. This is a closed meeting. Callan placed his case on the table and opened it with careful hands. Mrs. Vale is properly admitted, he said. She is here as the authorized controlling shareholder representative of Larkmere Dominion. The room went silent. It was not ordinary silence. It was the kind that made even powerful people afraid to breathe too loudly. Bren looked at Callan, then at Leora. What kind of joke is this? Edris adjusted his glasses and reviewed the documents in front of him. The ownership documents have been verified. Orson's voice sharpened. Verified by whom? Independent counsel, transfer records, the shareholder registry, and the voting control confirmation received after the rescue funding cleared, Edris said. Larkmere Dominion holds controlling voting interest in Varith Capital Trust. Sable's smile disappeared. Vesta turned toward Orson, confused for the first time. Bren gave a short laugh, but it sounded thin. No, that's impossible. Leora doesn't own anything like that. Leora finally looked at him. She did not look angry. That frightened him more. Callan removed a clear evidence sleeve from the case. Inside it was Leora's hospital bracelet. It was not there as legal proof of the company matter. It was there as a quiet reminder of the moment Bren had mistaken weakness for powerlessness. Bren saw it, his face tightened. Leora took her seat. Edris cleared his throat. For the record, Larkmere Dominion acquired control through a legally executed rescue buyout after Varith Capital Trust experienced financial instability, client withdrawals, liquidity concerns, and pending compliance risks. The shareholders began whispering. Orson lowered himself back into his chair, slower this time. Leora spoke calmly. I did not buy this firm to punish a family. I bought it to save what your leadership endangered. Her voice did not shake. That was what made everyone listen. She continued. Employees built their lives around this company. Clients trusted it with retirements, pensions, college funds, and futures. Those people did not deserve to suffer because the people at the top confused a family name with immunity. Bren pushed his chair back. Stop this, he said. You don't understand what you're reading. There it was again. The sentence he had used for years. In kitchens, at dinners, in hallways, in front of his mother, in front of Sable, in front of anyone he wanted to impress. Leora looked at Callan. Callan placed the ownership documents in front of Bren. Leora said, that sentence has carried you for 6 years, Bren. Today it collapses under signatures. A low murmur moved through the room. Bren stared at the documents. His eyes moved over the pages, searching for a flaw, a loophole, a mistake that would return the world to the shape he understood. He found none. Across the table, Sable slowly reached for her bag. She did not move fast. She was too smart for that, but Maylis saw her. Ms. Rennick, Maylis said evenly, you may want to remain seated. Several invoices under your company name are part of this review. Sable froze. Her hand stayed on the strap of her bag. For the first time since Leora had seen her at the hospital, Sable looked less like a woman taking someone's place and more like a woman realizing the floor beneath her had moved. Bren turned towards Sable, then back to Leora. What invoices? He demanded. Leora did not answer him directly. She nodded once to Callan. The lights dimmed slightly. A screen behind the board chair came to life. The title appeared in bold letters, Executive Misconduct Review, Misuse of Corporate Funds and Restricted Accounts. Bren's face lost color. Leora, he whispered, don't. For 1 second the room, the glass walls, the shareholders, the lawyers, and the whole broken marriage seemed to hold still. Leora looked at him with the same calm he had once mistaken for weakness. You said I should not speak unless spoken to, she said. The shareholders have spoken. Then Maylis opened the first folder, and every lie in the room leaned closer to the light. The first invoice appeared on the boardroom screen, and Bren Vale stopped breathing like a man who had just seen his own name on a locked door. No one spoke. The room that had been built for power suddenly felt like a courtroom. Maylis Wynne stood beside the screen with a folder in one hand and a remote in the other. Her voice was calm, almost plain, but every word landed heavily. Rennick Atelier Advisory build Verith Capital Trust for consulting services that do not match any completed work, approved campaign, investor presentation, board-authorized project, or measurable deliverable. The screen changed. A second invoice appeared. Executive Optics Retreat. Then another, Luxury Stakeholder Alignment. Then another, Private Image Restoration. Then the one that made Riven Holt close his eyes for a second, Premium Relationship Alignment Services. A low murmur moved through the shareholders. Sable Rennick sat frozen behind Bren, her hands still gripping the strap of her bag. Her face was tight now, all the softness gone. She looked at the screen as if the words had betrayed her. Maylis continued. These invoices were approved through executive channels. Several were approved personally by Bren Vale. Bren pushed back from the table. That is misleading. Leora did not move. She sat near the head of the table, hands folded, face calm. Her hospital bracelet remained sealed in the clear sleeve inside Callan Morrow's open case. She had not shown it to shame him first. She had not started with tears. She had not begun with the affair. She had begun with the money, because money left records, and records did not get tired, frightened, or manipulated. Maylis clicked again. A travel summary appeared. Private air travel, 2 oceanfront suites, luxury resort charges, premium dining. Spa services hidden under guest experience strategy. Maylis said, the luxury resort expenses were coded as business development and investor stabilization. No investor meeting occurred at the resort. No board-approved retreat agenda exists. No formal client presentation was scheduled. Bren looked toward Orson. Dad, say something. Orson's face had turned grey. Edris Vane leaned forward. Mr. Vale, you will have time to respond after the presentation. Bren's jaw tightened. He was not used to being told to wait. Maylis clicked again. This time the screen showed internal emails, one from Bren. Classify the Rennick Resort charges under investor stabilization. Keep away from general review until leadership transition is complete. The room became colder. Sable whispered, Bren, he turned on her in a flash. Don't. That single word exposed more than he meant it to. There was no love in it, only panic. Callan stood beside Leora. For clarity, the personal relationship between Mr. Vale and Ms. Rennick is not the legal basis of today's review. The basis is misuse of company funds, false vendor billing, improper approvals, concealment from review, and possible use of restricted investor protection funds. That mattered. Leora knew it mattered. She would not let anyone reduce this meeting to a jealous wife's anger. Bren had not lost the room because he cheated. He lost the room because he used power badly and thought no one would check the paper trail. Only then did Leora speak. Her voice was quiet. On the morning these charges were being hidden inside your books, my husband left me in a hospital bed to enjoy the trip they paid for. No one moved. Even Sable looked down. Bren's hand went to the water glass in front of him, but his fingers shook so badly the glass rattled against the table. That sound was small. It was also the loudest thing in the room. Leora looked at him then, and for one painful second, she did not see the arrogant man in the suit. She saw the man from years ago, nervous in a botanical conservatory, holding a simple ring and promising he only wanted her. That memory still hurt, because he had not always been this cruel. Or maybe she had loved the part of him that disappeared whenever power entered the room. Maylis moved to the final section. The most serious issue is this transfer. The screen changed again. A payment route appeared, marked in red. The money had not come from a normal marketing account. It had touched a restricted investor protection account before being moved through another cost center and paid towards Sable's company. A shareholder near the end of the table whispered, "That cannot be right." Maylis answered without looking away from the screen. "It is right, and it is documented." Edris picked up the resolution packet in front of him. His face was grim now. Given the evidence presented by the controlling shareholders audit team, he said, the board will now consider emergency resolutions. Bren stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "You cannot do this," he said. Security shifted near the door. Leora did not flinch. Edris read from the page. Resolution 1. Remove Bren Vale from all executive consideration, including the pending interim CEO appointment. A vote followed. Hands rose. Bren stared at them like he could not understand why power had stopped obeying him. Resolution 2. Suspend Bren Vale's access to company systems, accounts, discretionary funds, and executive facilities pending outside legal review. Maury hands rose. Sable's breathing became shallow. Resolution 3. Freeze discretionary compensation tied to improper approvals and begin clawback proceedings for benefits connected to unauthorized spending. Bren looked at Leora. Say something. She held his gaze. Edris continued. Resolution 4. Terminate Rennick Atelier Advisory's active contract with Varith Capital Trust and refer related invoices for civil recovery review. Sable finally stood. Bren told me this was approved. Bren spun toward her. You submitted the invoices. The room watched them turn on each other. All that romance, all that smiling from balconies, all that cruelty at hospital doors, and the first real pressure made them strangers. Leora felt no pleasure in it, only clarity. Sable looked around, searching for someone to protect her. Vesta looked away. Orson stared at the table. Bren was too busy saving himself. The empire Sable thought she was entering had no door left open for her. Edris read the final resolution. Resolution 5. Orson Vale will step aside from active leadership pending review of oversight failures, ignored internal warnings, and approvals connected to the disputed expenses. Orson looked up sharply. I built this firm, Leora answered gently, almost sadly, and then you protected your name more than the people who trusted it. Vesta's face twisted with anger. You planned this like a snake. For the first time, Leora turned fully toward her. No, Vesta, she said. I planned a rescue. Your son planned the betrayal. The words landed harder than shouting could have. Bren's shoulders sagged. Then, as if remembering the only card he thought he still had, he looked at Leora with desperate anger. I'm your husband. Leora looked at the ring on his hand, then at his face. You were, she said. Then you taught me the difference between a title and a truth. Callan closed one folder and placed a second one in front of Bren. Bren stared at it, his voice dropped. What is that? Leora's expression did not change. The part that is personal. Bren opened the folder, divorce papers, his face drained of what little color remained. You can't leave me with nothing, he said. Leora stood slowly, careful with her still healing body, but strong enough that no one mistook her for weak. I am leaving you with the truth, she said. It only feels like nothing because you built everything else on lies. Bren looked down at the papers, then at the screen still glowing behind him. For the first time all morning, he had no speech, no excuse, and no one left to save him. And at the far end of the table, the hospital bracelet inside Callan's case caught the light like the quiet beginning of an ending Bren had never thought she would write. 3 weeks after the emergency shareholder meeting, Bren Vale stood outside the building that once made him feel untouchable, and his access card did not work. The small red light blinked once. Denied. He tried again. Denied. Behind the glass doors, Varith employees moved through the lobby with new badges, new leadership notices, and a new name glowing behind the reception desk. Varith Lockmere Stewardship Group. The old gold letters of Varith Capital Trust were gone. Bren stared at the sign as if anger alone could change it back. His phone had not stopped ringing for days. Reporters wanted comments. Former friends wanted distance. Lawyers wanted documents. His father wanted someone to blame. Sable wanted protection until she realized he could no longer provide any. For the first time in his life. Bren had a last name that opened nothing. Inside the building, Leora Vale walked through the main floor slowly, not because she was weak, but because healing still demanded respect. Her body had improved, but she did not pretend the surgery had never happened. She had learned that strength was not the absence of pain. Sometimes strength was moving forward while carrying pain honestly. Employees stood when she passed, not out of fear, out of relief. She had not destroyed the company. She had saved it from the people who thought owning a name meant owning everyone under it. Callan Morrow walked beside her with a restructuring file tucked under one arm. Riven Holt followed with a careful stack of employee protection plans. He looked different now, still tired, but no longer trapped. The client reassurance calls are complete, Riven said. Most major accounts are staying, Leora nodded. And the employee pensions? Protected, he said. New Oversight Committee approved the safeguard plan this morning. For the first time in many days, Riven smiled. Leora returned it softly. Good, no innocent person should pay for what happened in that boardroom. That was the difference between her and the Vale family. They protected pride. She protected people. In the weeks after Bren's fall, the changes came quickly but carefully. Independent leadership replaced Orson's inner circle. Outside counsel reviewed every questionable transaction. Client accounts affected by improper spending were identified for compensation. Executive privileges were frozen. Personal expenses could no longer hide behind polished words like alignment and stabilization. Leora did not burn the firm down. She removed the rot and kept the structure standing for the people who had built their lives inside it. Across town, Orson Vale sat alone in a private office that no longer belonged to him. His retirement had been announced as voluntary, but everyone knew it was not. He had lost control of the firm he built because he protected bloodline over integrity. Vesta tried to keep her social place for a while. She made calls. She hosted lunches. She used old names and old favors, but power had a quiet way of leaving a room before people noticed. Invitations slowed. Friends became busy. The women who once laughed at Leora's silence now spoke gently about distancing themselves from the scandal. Vesta had spent years making Leora feel like she did not belong. Now Vesta was the one standing outside closed doors. Sable Rennick's fall was colder. Her company, Rennick Atelier Advisory, collapsed almost overnight. Former clients removed her from their websites. Legal notices followed her from office to office. She tried to blame Bren publicly, but the invoices carried her company name, her billing language, and her signature. One afternoon she walked out of a luxury lobby alone, carrying her own bag. No driver waited, no cameras followed, no powerful man stepped forward to save her. She had wanted to replace Leora. Instead, she became a warning about mistaking access for power. Bren's ending was quieter, and maybe that made it worse. He tried to call Leora many times. He sent angry messages first, then apologetic ones, then desperate ones. None reached her directly. Callan handled every communication. One evening, Bren saw a public photo from the foundation launch. Leora stood beneath a clean white banner with the Larkmere name beside another name he had never cared enough to ask about, the Marable Dane Patient Dignity Fund. He stared at the image for a long time. Leora was not wearing his ring. She was not standing behind him. She was not smiling because someone told her to. She stood at the center, confident, calm, free, and for the first time Bren understood what he had lost. Not a dependent wife, not a quiet woman he could command, not someone his family had been generous enough to accept. He had lost the most powerful person who had ever loved him. At the foundation launch, Nurse Elka stood near the front row in a simple navy dress. Leora had invited her personally. After the speeches, Leora found her near the side of the hall. "You were kind when no one had to be," Leora said. Nurse Elka's eyes softened. "You were alone. No one should wake up that way." "That is why this fund exists," Leora said. Delia Mert, 42, the new foundation director hired by Leora to manage patient recovery grants, stepped forward with a small donation box made of clear glass. It would hold the first symbolic items for the foundation archive. Leora looked at the box for a long moment, then she reached into her purse. First, she placed the hospital bracelet inside, then the wedding ring. The room was quiet but not heavy. It felt like the silence after a door finally closed. Callan stood a few feet away. "Do you want them preserved under your name?" Leora shook her head. "No," she said. "Let them remind someone else that being left is not the same as being finished." Later that evening, Leora returned once to the hospital recovery wing. She walked past the room where Bren had left her. The bed was empty now, cleaned and waiting for someone else's story. Beside it sat the same kind of chair. The kind Bren had left empty. Leora sat in it. This time she was not waiting for anyone. She looked at the window where rain had once blurred the world and remembered the woman who had cried alone with a phone in her hand. She did not hate that woman. She loved her. That woman had survived the moment before the stronger one arrived. Leora entered the hospital as a wife begging not to be forgotten. She entered the boardroom as an owner demanding accountability. And she left both places as something Bren had never understood. Not weak, not small, not replaceable, free. Bren abandoned her because he thought power was something a man gave a woman. Leora proved power was what remained when the wrong man finally walked away. Dear viewers, if this story touched you, please subscribe, like, and comment where you are watching from.